Well, we have the pleasure now of being joined by Matt Bevin, the governor of Kentucky. Governor, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Very welcome. Great to sit down with you.
So, Governor, I've got several questions I want to ask you about Kentucky and the policy stuff, but I got to start off. I was on Twitter this morning, and I saw a video of you that involved some grenades in an open field, and it's taken on quite a following. Tell us what that was about. I know you had a point there that you were making about reforms in Kentucky.
Sure, it's interesting that it has taken on a life of its own in some respects. I had my entire cabinet, we travel around the state so that people in Kentucky can meet them and they can meet people on the ground where they are. And this particular week, we were out at Eddyville, which is the maximum security prison in Kentucky, meeting and doing town hall forums out in that part of the state. Well, while we were visiting Eddyville with the team, we did some training with the CERT folks. These are the people who respond to emergencies inside of corrections facilities, what have you. As part of that demonstration, they had a lot of munitions, showed us how they control crowds, etc. And then members of the cabinet and my team were allowed to also take part in this, at the end of which there were a number of these smoke grenades and flashbang grenades that were left over. And so really on a bit of a lark, we just made this video. And it really came out kind of funny. It really wasn't intended to be taken quite as seriously as folks have taken it, but I'm delighted that it has, because we draw attention to the fact that indeed we have been trying to blow up corruption in inside dealing and red tape and a lot of things that, frankly, not just in Kentucky but in government in general, have proliferated in recent years.
That's terrific. Well, you've been governor now for, is it 3 years?
Coming up on 3 years, yeah. It'll be 3 years after this election.
Okay, so I saw that, during that first year you would have been a governor under President Obama.
Correct.
And then the last 2 years under Trump. Can you give us a sense of what the difference has been being a governor under Obama versus Trump?
Night and day. And I will say this, also just being an observer of history and of politics, there has never, certainly in my limited experience, but also in the experience of governors who've done this for a long time, there's never been an administration more open to governors than the Trump administration. The interaction, the desire to reach out, the proactive reaching out on behalf of the president himself and the administration, night and day by comparison to the Obama administration. They really didn't care what governors thought. They really didn't have a lot of interaction at all. And it is a wonderful respect for the 10th Amendment, for the sovereignty of states, and it is refreshing at every turn what the Trump administration is doing.
Well, they've certainly gotten a lot done, especially recently on the Supreme Court. We saw an encouraging development with Kavanaugh now on the court. In D.C., for those of us who had the misfortune of seeing a lot of mob mentality protesters, has that mob mentality that has affected really the far left of the Democratic Party, has that affected you in any way?
Just look at the responses to that video that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Just the vitriol and the insanity. We've become very divisive. We've become a kind of the civil discourse has largely gone out the window. It's a shame. There is no more bipartisanship. It's very partisan. People tend, the fact that a Ruth Bader Ginsburg made it through the Supreme Court with 94 or 95 votes of affirmation, and as she should have. She was qualified. She may be very liberal, and I, among others, may have disagreed with her ideology, but I couldn't disregard the fact that she was qualified. Same with Kavanaugh, but now it isn't about whether someone's qualified. It's whether or not we can assassinate their character and try to prevent them from bringing a different mindset than we might have ourselves. And this is what's wrong with the political process. So yes, it affects us nationally. It affects us in Kentucky. My opposition does this nonstop. Even now, while I'm not on the ballot, there are many, many people who are hoping to be the next governor, who are helping to fund PACs and are being helped by PACs that are running ads against legislators that are really designed to attack me. They're all about me and attacking me, but this is what happens, and maybe it's always been this way. It just seems more of it than ever before.
Now, when you took office, my understanding is that there's been a shift toward the Republican Party in the legislature in Kentucky that really for the first time in since the 1930s, the New Deal?
Well, I will say this. I'm the third governor since World War II that's a Republican. I think the fourth in 100 years. We don't do that very often. When I was elected, the House was very strongly held by Democrats and had been uninterrupted, to your point, since 1920.
Wow.
Actually, 95 straight years of Democrat control.
It's like the Cubs winning the World Series.
Exactly. It was a little. It really was. We broke both the curse of the goat and the curse of the Bambino in the case of the Red Sox and all these other century-long curses, I suppose. But that did change in 2016. So there's a tremendous effort right now in Kentucky, and as well there should be, I suppose, for the Democrats to reseize the House in Kentucky. And so it's this silly season, 3 weeks to go, and lots of things being thrown about on the air.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about the tax cuts and their effect in your state. At the Heritage Foundation, we've done a state-by-state study of what their impact is, and just one figure here, I see that tax reform in Kentucky for the average family of four is bringing in extra $25,000 in take-home pay over the next 10 years. Are folks in Kentucky starting to feel this effect, and what does tax reform mean for your constituents?
There's no question that people on the ground feel it. One of my daughters was working at a large national company who then decided to bump everybody's minimum pay from, in that case, $9.50 an hour she was making to $11 an hour. So a teenager suddenly went from $9.50 to $11. You think she wasn't fired up? She was very fired up. There's a whole lot of people who are seeing that on a large scale, small scale. People hiring more people, expending more capital. There's a lot of investment going on, and so yes, you wouldn't know it to read the editorial boards because the papers that are owned by the McClatchys and the Gannett's, they're very liberal. They don't like the president. They don't like the idea that government isn't the solution, that people spending their own money might just be a better way to go, and so they don't like it, but the people on the ground love it, and the small business owners love it, and the people who actually work for a living and pay taxes love it.
Now, Kentucky is also a big coal state. Traditionally, a lot of coal coming out of Kentucky. Has Trump's deregulation of coal had an impact on your state yet?
Well, the deregulation really has less to do with the coal, but more on the way in which the mining of coal is just monitored.
Yeah.
And the fact that this EPA and this administration are less desirous of destroying the coal industry. I mean, the Obama administration was very overt, and Hillary Clinton, same thing, that they were determined to remove it. 80% of the electricity in Kentucky is still powered by coal. Over a third of the electricity in America is still powered by coal. In the world, it is far and away the most highly contributing component to the world's energy grid. So it's a big player in Kentucky still. And yes, the fact that the president isn't in an all-out war on it as the previous president was has been tremendous. And we've seen a stabilization. We've also seen exports up 4, 5, 6 times for Kentucky coal, and I would assume coal coming from other places as well.
Wow, that's tremendous. Well, Governor, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and join us. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.